Vincent last. Save the best for last.
So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the full restoration demo at the very top.
What do you mean by the full?
The thing with all the 5 clips cut together with
This,
the
the
audio.
one with sound,
Yeah.
okay.
Then I'm going to just give my little introduction stuff, and then we'll have you do the individual
Now,
clips, so you'll have to tell the
The,
projectionist.
the 5 clips aren't just fun clips, they all have conditions. So
No, we want you to talk about each one.
okay.
You're going to tell him play it, and then you'll talk
Are they on one reel?
No,
or-
you're separate.
So we're gonna stop each one and talk about one.
You are. You're going to have to cue the projectionist when you want him to play the next one.
Great.
Yeah.
And then the last one, the final one, which doesn't have music, just the rough shots.
The last thing is the scene in the final. Is a clip from the final beautiful restoration.
But that's
Good morning.
condition.
Hello.
So you're gonna start with the 5 silent shots, and we're gonna close with the one that has sound.
Good morning. My name is Kline. I'm with the Criterion Collection in New York. Hi, Tisha. I see you. Thank you for coming this morning, bright and early, for our talk on this film, All That Money Can Buy. We're lucky enough to have 2 people who presided over the restoration and also a third person who managed the restoration for the lab itself. So let me introduce everybody. First, next to me is my colleague from the Criterion Collection and Janus Films, Karen Stetler. And Karen oversaw the restoration with the person next to her, Scott MacQueen, who did this restoration for the UCLA Film and Television Archive. This is a lifelong passion project, I think, for Scott, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And next to Scott is Vincent Pirozzi, who not only has an Italian name, but also lives in Los Angeles, and he works at Roundabout Entertainment, and they were the ones who, what was the laboratory for this new 4K restoration of this film. So, Karen, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about how this restoration became started, how it started, and also maybe talk about the people who helped you bring it to life and the restoration partners for it.
I guess I have to put on my glasses. Is this on? Yeah.
It's on.
So the restoration is a really great partnership between quite a few organizations. The Janus Films Library, we're the distributor of the film, and the restoration was something that was a cooperation between us, the Film Foundation, and Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation, and the UCLA Film and Television Archive, and Scott supervised the work. The Museum of Modern Art, which was housing some of the elements, and the Library of Congress, which had some of the other elements. So we all kind of got together, and everything went out to LA for Scott to review and come up with, the best combinations to recreate the long version of the film. So my question is, how many people have seen the film before? Just a few, okay. So this film was released in 1941, and it was directed by William Dieterle, and the original release version was 106 minutes, and over the years, it was edited down twice. Finally, it went down to 84 minutes, right, Scott? So for many, many years, it was considered that only this 84-minute version existed. And in 1991, at Criterion, we found a 16 millimeter print of the long version of the film and finally put back the whole film. Only the sequences, of course, that was on Laserdisc. The sequences, of course, didn't look that good of the restored footage because it was from a 16 print. But it was the best that there was at the time, we thought. And then after that, somehow Scott and I got to know each other, and we've been talking about this film for something like 20 years. And I can always count on every few years Scott calling me up to say, time to work on Devil and Daniel Webster again. So it was 2003, we did our DVD edition, and at that point, there was a 35 millimeter print that belonged to the director William Dieterle that was in an archive in Germany. So we were able, Lee had that scanned, right?
Yeah, it was. We scanned it at ARRI back, I don't even remember when it was.
2003.
2003,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this was a slight improvement over the 16 millimeter restored footage. So it was getting better. And then Scott called me a couple of years ago, having figured out that there were even better materials at the Library of Congress, and that it was time to do it again. And this time we were able to do it in 4K as well. And the Film Foundation is very concerned about preservation and film, so ultimately there's film out on this restoration as well too. And so we're very happy. It's beautiful black and white cinematography. It's based on a short story by Stephen Vincent Benet, who is a writer in the kind of Americana tradition. He was very concerned about American politics, and it follows a short story, and it is a sort of fictionalized version of this character, Daniel Webster, who is a very famous American orator and attorney, and he was a senator, and he ran for president, and he was the Secretary of State under 3 presidents. And, but it's, you know, it's somewhat fictionalized, obviously. And the short story was also made into a play and an opera before the film was made.
And a radio show.
Oh, and a radio show. And the film was edited by Robert Wise, who had just come off of editing Citizen Kane. And the score is by Bernard Herrmann. And he worked on Citizen Kane too, right? This was only his...
Kane and Amberson's.
Yeah.
Those 3 pictures kind of lived together. And Herrmann wrote the music for the radio show too.
Yeah, that's why they found
And
him.
this was the first and only Oscar Herrmann ever received.
Yeah.
For that score.
And the score is kind of a combination of American folk music, but he also used some sort of innovative electronic music, because there are some interesting special effects in here for the sequences with the devil. And yes, and he got the Oscar for it. There is some complicated stories about the title of the film. At our company, we've always released it under The Devil and Daniel Webster, which is a name people recognize partly because of the short story that it's based on. Originally, the studio was, I mean, there was a couple of reasons. They were concerned that having the word devil in the title might be a problem selling the film in the 40s in the South in America. But they also, what I don't understand, they had another film the same year that had the word...
Gene Arthur, the Devil, and Miss Jones.
And Miss Jones. So I don't know why they thought that one was okay.
Well,
But
that had just come out in April, and
Right.
this was an August release, so they were worried about there being exhibitor confusion
Right.
with 2 devils.
But I don't know why they thought it was okay to have devil in the title for one movie and not the other, but
It's
it's
yeah, it's
strange,
really
yeah. So in previews, it was called Here is a Man. Is that the preview
That's the
title?
preview
Yeah.
title.
And then after the preview, they changed it to All That Money Can Buy.
They played with it under a lot of titles. Once they had trouble with the devil concept, they actually held an in-house contest among their
Yeah,
employees.
yeah.
It was called The Devil and Daniel Webster.
That was the
They
popular
called
title.
It was shot under the title something or other Gold. I'm losing track of it right now. And then it also was Here is a Man at that time.
Right.
And it
It was also at one point called A Certain Mr. Scratch. And Mr. Scratch is the name of the devil in the movie, and it comes from, it's sort of a
It's a New
folksy
England,
tame,
yeah.
it's a New England term, the movie, it's set in New England.
What did Dieterle refer to it as mostly?
Dieterle probably shot it as under Devil
Well,
and
Devil Daniel Webster, yeah,
And that's the title that is on Herrmann's score sheets.
yeah.
When you look at his
Yeah.
sketches for the score. So that was what they, obviously with that title being popular, that was how he began with. And the picture had trouble too, because originally the devil was played by Thomas Mitchell. And 11 weeks into shooting, Mitchell had an accident with a horse and carriage, and it's badly damaged. He had to go off the picture. And they had to then bring in Walter Houston. So it's a terrible thing for
Thomas Mitchell.
Mitchell, but I mean, Houston's casting makes all the difference.
Yeah, he's amazing.
And the confusion regarding the naming really carried through till today. When all the elements that you mentioned started to show up, at the laboratory for assessment, there was not one set of elements with the same name. You had one was Devil and the Daniel.
Daniel and the Devil was
Daniel
one of
and
the
the
Daniel
titles
and
too.
the Devil
Yep.
is a reissue title from the 50s. The part titles say All That Money Can Buy.
Yeah, I mean, it was just,
So, everything is got different language to it because it was such a confused production.
But Scott made the decision in the archive to restore it under All That Money Can Buy, because that is the title that the very first commercial release.
It's the
it was
original
It's
title.
the
It's the
original
title
release
that won the Oscar.
Yep.
It's what belonged there.
So we'll have to decide if we reissue it again. We've always released it as The Devil and Daniel Webster, because we only had the shorter version for many, many, many years. So we'll have to talk about that.
Okay, the
All right, let's
lecture's finished. We talked about the titles, and that was
Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. It's a very enjoyable, fun movie. It's just that the cinematography is gorgeous, and there are some people that claim it was influenced by Citizen Kane, but we don't necessarily.
Well, it certainly was. There's this nexus of RKO at that time. The house style had echoes emanating from Stranger on the Third Floor, which is kind of the father of film noir. And Wells was at the studio. Dieterle had just made Hunchback of Notre Dame at the studio. And here you've got Robert Wise on the editing room. Herman scored all three. The gaffers are the same, all the same technical people. And so it absorbs the house style.
The house style,
of
yeah.
RKO. And
But William Dieterle was a good director in his own right.
Oh,
It's
fabulous
not, it's not as
director,
if
yeah.
he copied Orson Welles.
No, he
All
didn't.
right, we're going to show you first. The other thing I want to make a special point of saying is that the restoration funding for this project was through the Film Foundation and the Hobson Lucas Family Foundation, which is George Lucas and his wife, and they very generously donated the majority of the money for the restoration. And we're really always pleased to be in partnership with the Film Foundation. I think Jennifer Ahn from the foundation is at the festival, but I don't think she's here today. I'm going to read one funny thing about the title, if I can find it in my papers, and then we're going to start showing you some clips. Yesterday, I was talking to Paul Malcolm from the UCLA Archive, and he will be introducing the restoration tomorrow at the screening at 6:15, and we were talking about the whole story about the titles, and he went on the internet and he found an original review of the film from 1941, right when it came out, and it says, Steve and Vincent Benet's Faustian fantasy, The Devil and Daniel Webster, has been made into a striking and provocative film, in spite of certain liberties taken with the original, including a stupid change of title. The new musical offering is a rare motion picture achievement. All That Money Can Buy, as it is now called, will doubtless have to fight for audience recognition, because he says because there were not big names in the cast. But I thought that was very funny that right off the bat they were criticizing the fact that the title had been changed.
And interestingly enough, Dieterle was part of Murnau's outfit in the 20s in Germany.
In Germany, yeah.
And he played Valentine in Murnau's film of Faust. So he has a history with the Faustian tale.
It is it's an Americana Faustian tale.
And
That's the
there's
best way.
a lot of German influence too. I mean, there's the wonderful scene where Mr. Meiser Stevens is danced to death by Simone, and that is an echo of Farman Maria, where Maria dances with death. It's all very, very Germanic through an American. Well, it's American through a Germanic filter.
Yeah. So we're going to show you a little restoration demo all the way through, and then Scott's going to talk about individual parts of it and the challenges of the restoration.
Yeah, so let's turn off the lights, please, and roll that first clip. Thank you.
Can you see them?
This is always the hardest part.
Camera negative tears, corrected. Bad replacement footage. Jitter, bad damage and repairs. Film damage. Negative dirt, scratches, marks on the negative.
It's really beautiful. It is. I get to see it tomorrow on the actual big screen. Yep. All right. So, did you want to go through those clips one at a time and talk about them a little bit more?
I think they're fairly self-evident. Does anyone have questions about them? The original title, Here is a Man, comes from the German nitrate dupe negative, and we recreated All That Money Can Buy on the model of that negative with the burlap background, which is meant to represent the sack, the gold, the sacks of wheat that have the gold in them. You have camera negative tears and hops. The one shot of Miser Stevens holding the gold, it's bad duplicate negative. You can see it gets milky and thin, and we replaced that from the German nitrate dupe negative. Vincent, do you want to talk a bit about what you did?
Actually, can you start? I think let's start and go
Yes,
from
by
the
all
beginning
means.
of like what the pieces of films that you had access to were exactly.
Yeah, I thought I just did that.
Well,
Well-
but for the majority of the film was from the nitrate.
We used the camera negative for most of the film. We filled in things such as the tear, the hops, the negative marks, the dirt, and the bad replacement footage.
Okay.
And wasn't there one reel missing of the negative?
There was a reel of the negative missing and a reel of the soundtrack negative missing. It was we'll talk about the sound later, it was a dual bilateral RCA track, which has a particular character, same kind of track that Wells used in Kane and Amberson, and Dieterle had used it in Hunchback, most notably in the scaffold scene where Esmeralda is rescued from the scaffold, which is about to be hung. Does anybody remember that sequence?
Most of them have not seen the film.
Okay, well, they're film lovers. You don't know what they do know and don't know.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna. You don't want to show each one of those clips?
Yes, yes.
One at a time.
Not these, but the next reel that's coming.
I'll talk a little bit about that. If we could put up just that very first clip
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
titles,
Yeah.
just for a minute, because that was definitely an interesting challenge. Because essentially, as if it wasn't self-explanatory, which element was that? There is the man.
Here is a Man is the nitrate dupe negative original title.
Okay, so essentially we took that, where the before, and like as Scott said, the background is kind of a burlap sack. So what we had to do is essentially use that, and we kind of used that actual background and kind of stole it by like painting out all of the letters, but at the same time created a new alphabet with those letters to essentially make just a clean background. And then, as you saw on the
I defy anyone to identify the transition in the background or the letter fonts.
Well, let's take a look at it.
Sure.
Again, that section, the first
Can you
clip.
play the first clip, please, after
The
the one
short
we
one.
just
Yes.
showed? Yes, the
Yes.
first short one.
You might want to turn the sound down a bit so we can
No, it doesn't
concentrate.
have sound. It doesn't have sound, yeah.
On the little ones.
Oh, the little ones, okay. Well, we just had that with music. I don't think we have the title.
Yes, we do. We broke them up one at a time.
Oh, and you took sound off.
So yeah, basically we kind of stole this background, and essentially the alphabet. So created a clean background of just the sack, and then basically created a new layer with the new titles.
And you left in a little bit of weave.
Yeah.
Keep that film look.
Keep it natural looking, and then once again, this is all part of it. It cut off, but then there's the credits start to scroll over the background. So all of that was created, which was pretty challenging, but I think it turned out pretty well.
You guys have done harder things, though, like removing subtitles from an entire feature. So, yes, so this was probably a piece of cake.
Can you
Walk in
spell
the park.
detour?
Can you? Can ask Scott or we can, about one of the interesting things is we didn't know for a very, very long time that there was this 35 millimeter dupe negative at the Library of Congress, which Scott discovered quite a while after we had done the last round of
It's the
restoration.
German dupe negative. In the 90s, early 90s, the Germans cleaned out their vaults, and they decided to keep just German language, German origin titles. And so they offered all the American nitrate for repatriation. And that's when the library said, we'll take it. So they took a lot of things.
When did you find out about that was there?
What is this? This is 2012, early 2000s.
So it was always in your head that we could go back and do this from that.
Yeah.
So that was really a
I've
gift.
dreamt of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nobody, I don't know, nobody knew it was still around.
No,
Yeah.
because like everything else, inventory records are not concise in Europe or here. And it wasn't until all this material came over that the library identified what they were getting.
Well, and also the title change, the title
And I'll
changes
give
probably
credit
didn't
to
help.
George Williman at the library for telling me
George
about
is
it.
fantastic. And
George was the one that,
he's the nitrate master.
yeah, he is the nitrate master.
Yes. And he'd probably call himself that, too.
So maybe Vincent, can you talk a little bit about just the challenges with the grading, with the fact that you had these two different elements, and there's quite a bit of restored footage in here because the movie had gone from 106 to 84.
Sure,
So-
yeah. I mean, the negative, some of those clips demonstrated there was, some damage, significant damage in the negative. I mean, a lot of it was in great shape, really, all things considered. But there was definitely instances where there was significant damage and frames missing. So we would.
You mentioned that there were frames actually missing at the middle of shots
Yeah.
or at splices.
So what we tried to do was keep as much of the negative as possible and not have it disruptive to have like, a shot playing and then in the middle of the shot have like 2 or 3 frames just inserted that would, be an obvious change of elements. So what we tried to do, and I think we were successful, is I think most of those cases we almost kind of made a transition to the insert, so it wasn't like a direct cut. We kind of made a dissolve into the different element and then back to the negative. So,
Because that is one of the hardest things to do in restoration is creating missing frames.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, if someone's not doing anything or moving their anything, then
Yeah.
it's quite easy. But if there's
And there are
motion
also
across the room-
occasions where you can pull out the frame and pull up the sound in ways that are invisible. You don't see it.
Yeah.
You prefer not to do that.
Correct.
But it can be done, and Vincent also can recreate the frame by averaging things.
and I think there was a couple instances that we didn't catch until very, very late in the restoration that, no one, it was a pretty subtle.
And there are flash frames where there's a light leak, or you'll have, if the element is timed or graded, you can get grading changes that aren't correct, where the frame goes bright or dark. The worst is when you get, and it was very common in the 30s and 40s, one perf out. The light change would happen earlier or late, and so along the top perforation, you would get a flash or a darkening, just the height of one perforation. And again, sometimes you can paint that easily, and other times you have to fight it.
But more to your point, Karen, I mean, whenever there's a mix of elements, the grading to try and kind of keep things balanced and even can be challenging. But in this case, I mean, there was no terrible element. Like, luckily, we didn't have to go to the 16 like you guys did some years ago.
Yeah.
So that would have been tough to fold in. But luckily, I think just a lot of the heavy lifting of this restoration, in my mind, was the kind of all the work that you guys had done in preparation for it behind the scenes by gathering the best elements.
Now, one thing interesting about this is that the version contains shots we've never seen, since audiences never saw them. They probably were in the preview only. And there are 3 extra shots in reel 1A when Jabez is having hard luck. The pig breaks his leg. Different things are going wrong. Mary falls off the wagon, and then he drops a whole sack of seed corn into a mud puddle, and he invokes the devil. I'd sell my soul for 2 cents. And while these things are going on, and then later, you have these shots in negative of Mr. Scratch in close-up, smiling and laughing at his misfortune. And they are like 3 and 4 seconds long. And they're very odd, and they kind of distract you, but they climax at the moment when there's the big hailstorm, when Herman's music rises to a big crescendo, and his wife is sobbing about the wheat, and he goes, "But not my wheat." And he looks at it all, his neighbor's bad luck, and he begins to laugh. And then in the sky, just like the other shots, you have Scratch laughing maniacally at the success of he's got him now. He's got him. And the first 3 shots are like the setup of the melody, and this is the climax of the melody. So it's great to have that back. And there's also a censor cut, which I didn't discover till the end. When the jury convenes, all these rogues and knaves of American history, including Benedict Arnold and Big and Little Harp, they all come parading in this evil, wicked light. And the foreman of the jury says, brings in the judge, and he says, Judge Haythorne presiding. But he actually says in the uncut version, Judge Haythorne, the witch burner, presiding. And he's a famous character from history. He was Nathaniel Hawthorne's great uncle or something. He was the one member of the Salem witch trials who did not recant his wickedness. And so here he's the judge over the jury of the damned.
So are you saying that this restoration has now even more than we had?
Again, they're brief shots, but
Right.
yes, the things no one has seen since the preview.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. Do you want to show the individual shots, the rest of them from that demo, or do you?
Sure. Would you
or
think
do
so?
you-
Sure.
Okay, so that you can roll the.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk about each one then?
Yeah, we'll talk about them one at a time, stop and
Yeah,
roll
and then
on.
we'll show you a clip of the final second. Yeah, the second.
The second of the short clips,
Yeah.
if we could show that DCP, turn on the lights and show that quickly.
Yeah, and this is without sound, but just to show some of the issues we had and some of the quality of the film.
Okay, here we go.
So this is, that flashed by so fast.
You want to show? Can you
this is,
Yeah. Can you repeat that one more time?
repeat that, I'm trying to see what that was.
also hard when you're next.
Pouring the water, and I can't recall what. This was a shot that had a tear in it.
Yeah.
There it is. So that's a very common, typical tear, which was realigned, re-registered, printed out, painted out. Thank you, Vincent and friends. That's really all there's to say about that. It's your basic painting of a torn frame. It's in our business, kind of SOP. We do all the time. Here's
you
the
can show this one.
Miser stone that we had to replace from the very bad dupe negative.
Okay, but let's play that the next clip.
So that's the way we received it. And this is the correction where the tear and the hop again repaired.
Now let's play that one more time so people can view it again.
Oh, I'm sorry, that one actually comes from the German dupe negative. It wasn't. That's right, but it's camera negative scan with a German copy put in that doesn't have the damage.
Pretty good.
Scott, watch your. So let's play the next one. It's-
Sure,
Scott,
sure.
move your-
I'm sorry. Okay, here's Mary in bed again. More damage and I don't know what you want to call it. They're like cement splices. It's gummy cement.
Yeah,
along
play
the
that one
edges
again
of the
as well.
film.
Gummy cement.
film cement, and it's from dupe negative as well. I'm sorry, that's from original negative. And so there we had to go back to the dupe and fix it. Again, that's pretty standard work in our business.
Yeah, every day.
Okay, let's
So,
play the next one.
let's see the next one. Okay, so this is Daniel with the two Daniels. This is Jabez's son Daniel. Again, common tears and such have been painted out.
And then, is there one more?
I think there's one more, yes?
The short ones?
Yeah, of the short type. Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that's as received, negative dirt scratches, and then painted out. Again, tried to stay in original negative wherever we could.
It's also painted out and graded, so it is sort
Yeah.
of final in the after.
Okay.
So one of the other things that we didn't talk about, and I'll be very brief about it, is the sound work on it. James G. Stewart, the head mixer at RKO, evolved a system at that time, a dual bilateral track system. This would have been a RCA variable area, 2 bias lines, which had extrusions that modulated left and right out each way. And the point of this, what it could do, was it was able to reduce noise and increase volume so that during average passages you could get a much quieter sound, and where you had loud explosive sound, it kept distortion away. And most famously, you might remember it in the News on the March moment in Citizen Kane, when the globe breaks and she pulls the sheet up and the reporter yells, "News on the march!" And out of nowhere, you get this big, loud sound. And Dieterle used it, as I said, in the scaffold scene in The Hunchback, and they evolved it here as well Herman fell in love with it, and he used it all throughout here, as he had in Kane and Amberson's. And here you catch it with Scratch's appearance in the barn, for one thing, to which he did more innovative sound work. He had a recording crew go out to the San Fernando Valley outside of LA at 4 o'clock in the morning and record the sound of telephone wires. Anyone here familiar with that? There's a condition of humidity and all that you get, particularly on hot days, where the wires sing. I used to hear this as a kid. The pole outside our house did it all the time. So he recorded that for an ethereal sound, and then he had the soundtrack painted with paint and black ink to create a artificial fundamental C. Mix those together, and you get this weird oscillating sound when the devil appears. It's absolutely stunning. And of course, you haven't really heard it because I think most presentations filter it out because it sounds like it's noise. And certainly as we went through the sound work on it, this is legend that he did this, it's always been written about, but when we came back from it and all, at the end of the scene when they call Jabez, it goes to complete silence and the vocal takes over as they call him. So you can hear the intention of that sound, big as life. So it's a subtle thing, but nobody was doing things like this in 1931 except for people like Wells and Herman and Dieterle. So.
Yeah. Scott, Karen, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to take some questions, but first I'd like to show a clip of something that we actually with picture and sound.
Right.
And just enjoy that for a few minutes so you can see the fruits of their labor as an actual piece of movie. So if we could turn down the lights, we'll show that, and then we'll come back and take some questions.
So that would be that very last clip.
Yes, very last clip.
Nothing ever goes right for me.
Okay, so here are the shots of Scratch and Negative. These are the shots of Scratch and Negative. Bad luck, he misses the fox.
Did you get it? No, I didn't, concern it. And he got 2 of your Plymouth Rock hens.
Well, we'll have to do without them. You run along, get the seat. I tend to marry.
The great Jane Darwell, Ma Jode from Grapes of Wrath. So now we're going to go into the disaster of the wheat falling into the mud puddle and the devil's appearance with that sound
A
pattern.
man sell his soul to the devil, and I would for about 2 cents. You guess nobody heard? I hope not.
Good evening, neighbor Snow.
Who are you?
My name is Scratch. I often go by that name in New England.
I don't have any business with you.
Do you deny that you called me? I've known people in other states who went back on their word, but I didn't expect it in New Hampshire.
You can't say that to me. I'm New Hampshire, and if I say I called you, I did. Guess I did.
You've had a lot of bad luck these days. And yet, it's all so unnecessary. When I think of your opportunities,
My opportunities.
why, man, you have one of the richest farms in the county. You just go about it the wrong way. So many men do. Hard work. That's all right for people who don't know how to do anything else. It's all right for people who aren't lucky. But once you're lucky, you don't have to work for other people. You make them work for you.
Well, now, mister, that sounds all right. But how do I go about it?
Clever man like yourself, he can find money anywhere. Money to pay his bills, money for his wife and children, money enough to be a rich man. All he needs is a friend to point it out to him. Like this.
That final kick of the gold is, of course, the work of Robert Wise, and it's one of the most remarkable pieces of editing. If you look at it carefully, the gold slides down and then a couple of pieces drip off, and it's really amazing. What else was there to say about that? There's no more to say. That's it.
It's very beautiful.
We hope people will go see it tomorrow.
Camera work by the great Joseph August, by the way.
I, like most of you, had not seen the film until we worked on it, and it is a true masterpiece. On the production level is amazing. Walter Houston as the devil is pretty amazing.
It's one of the great American films.
It's in the National Historic Register, yeah?
I don't know,
I think it might be, yeah.
but you'll all come and see.
Does anybody have any questions for
Scott.
I don't know,
Vincent or
Scott
Karen or
Vincent or Karen?
Lee?
I guess you guys have covered literally everything.
Yeah, we hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming, and come see the movie, and then you'll really be an expert. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
It's so beautiful, Scott.
Really?
I mean, it's absolutely stunning. Yeah, it's
You'll
stunning.
love it.
Absolutely. Very excited.
Yeah.
I've only seen it kind of in a crappy, not crappy,